Thank you so much, and thank you, Eduardo, for a great first talk. Makes my talk much simpler, so I don't have to give you all the introductory stuff on agent-based simulations. This talk will be about a specific result that comes out of agent-based simulations performed on lending markets. Specifically, I'll show an example from Aave, but there are many more case studies. I just don't have the time to go over all of them. And it's a vulnerability which is actually common to Aave, Compound, and virtually any Aave and Compound fork that has static liquidation incentives. So just as a premise, why is agent-based, one thing that could be added to the previous discussion, agent-based simulations, these are important for conversing with regulators, showing that we're a mature ecosystem, that we take risk very seriously, and that we analyze these Rube Goldberg machines that we build in DeFi in a rigorous manner. All right, so the main topic of this talk is, as you saw before, toxic liquidation spirals. What I'll be talking about is based on this paper. It was picked up by Messari Research and Bloomberg Business. If you want to go read more mainstream versions of it, I will try to break it down as much as possible. Trigger warning: there's going to be one slide of high school algebra. Okay, so if I hope I don't lose you on that one. All right. Okay. So first and foremost, who here knows what a money market, what a lending market is? Raise your hands. Good, fantastic. I go through this pretty fast. So a lending market is basically just a platform that allows independent users, agents, if you will, from a computational perspective, to bring in assets, use them as collateral to borrow other users' assets, and so on and so forth. They can basically enter complex portfolio positions. In this case, we got Alice that comes with stable coins to earn a yield on our stable coins. We got Bob that comes in with Matic to long it against USDC, and we got Charlie, who's ultra bullish on ETH. And he's just shorting the hell out of every single stablecoin to long Ethereum. Fantastic. So a lending market is basically, at any given moment, it's the collection of all these interrelations between users, and more specifically, the quality of the assets that they're collateralizing and borrowing, and the ratio between these. So one crucial quantity that is possibly the most important quantity that defines a user on a lending market is known as the loan-to-value ratio. Many of you probably know what that is, but just to make it simple, the loan-to-value ratio, written here as LTV, is just the ratio between the total value of the assets borrowed by a user and the total value of the collateral of said user. At any given moment in time, the health of a user is effectively defined by the assets and this number, and typically, if this number gets too large, users need to get liquidated. They need to be sanitized because on DeFi lending markets, you have the requirement that all users are over collateralized at all times. In other words, the value of their collateral must be greater than the value of their borrowed amounts. If that ever fails, you've created an insolvency, you've created bad debt, however you want to call it. So effectively, LTV always has to be less than 1. If it ever grows above 1, you've created an insolvency. All right, basics on liquidation. So liquidation is a mechanism whereby we allow open market agents to sanitize users that have gotten too unhealthy. All right, so here Charlie's LTV got a little too high, and what a protocol allows liquidators to do is to basically repay some amount of a user's loan, and in exchange, repossess some amount of their collateral. Okay, the amount of the collateral they repossess is actually boosted by some bonus to effectively incentivize liquidators to perform their actions, and that's called the liquidation incentive. So you have this condition that the total collateral repossessed by a liquidator is 1 plus the incentive times the loan repaid by the liquidator. So that's basically what you see here in this figure. Are we good until now? I got you, right? Fantastic. All right. So liquidations must make users healthier. Healthier here meaning they must lower the loan-to-value ratio of the user. If a liquidation makes the LTV of a user higher, that's a problem. Especially because if a user is liquidatable and the liquidation makes the LTV of the user higher, guess what? The user is liquidatable again and again and again and again, so on and so forth. All right? So we come to our trigger warning. There's going to be one slide of high school algebra, but I swear to God, it's super dead simple. I wouldn't put it if it wasn't for the fact that it's just such a simple result It's crazy that it hasn't been taken seriously by major risk assessment providers for protocols such as Compound and Aave. All right, so we have to express mathematically this notion that liquidations must make user positions healthier. How do we do that? Well, let's assume that a liquidation took place. So a liquidation took the LTV of a user from some initial value to a final value. That final value is just going to be the total amount of loans that they have after the liquidations divided by the total amount of collateral that they have after the liquidations. Fantastic. But we can write this as the total amount of initial loans minus whatever the liquidator repaid. That's what this delta B is, just the change in loan offered by the liquidator repaying the loan, divided the initial collateral minus 1 plus incentive times whatever the liquidator repaid. Are we all good here? I'm just rewriting what I wrote in the previous slides. Fantastic. So now we just do one quick algebra move. We literally just we basically pull out this C initial from the denominator, right? The only reason why you got to do this is because now you get this nice factor up here of B initial divided C initial, which is just the initial loan-to-value ratio of the user. So now we're here, okay? And liquidations must make user positions healthier. So the final loan-to-value has to be less than the initial loan-to-value, all right? And we're going to focus on this, okay? So now we just expand this out, literally multiply through by this denominator. And as it often happens when you do correct math, the things that look complex at the beginning just kind of melt away in complete insignificance. So we have LTV initial on both sides of the equation. We get rid of that shit. Then we were left with this. We got this multiplication by delta B over C initial on both sides of the equation. Get rid of that shit, right? Which is, by the way, wonderful because now suddenly we're getting a result that has no dependence whatsoever on what the liquidator chose to repay, okay? We're getting like a very fundamental result, which is this. So thank you, congratulations to all of you for having made it through this algebra. This is, I hope it wasn't too stressful. But this is the condition. Basically, for a liquidation to be healthy, the LTV that the user has at the moment they get liquidated has to be less than 1 over 1 plus the incentive, the liquidation incentive, which we're gonna call the toxic LTV for reasons which are gonna become very apparent. Let's put some numbers to this, just to bring things back to earth, because otherwise it seems like it's all living in our head and it's all like mumbo jumbo. If the liquidation incentive is 10%, the toxic LTV is 90.9%. If the liquidation incentive is 5%, the toxic LTV works out to 95.2%. Now, what's super crucial to see here, these are numbers less than 1. I mean, I wrote them in percentages, but if you think of them in decimal terms, they're numbers less than 1. So what this is telling you is that LTV toxic is actually a totally fine LTV. Like the user is over-collateralized. They have more collateral than loans if they ever reach this LTV toxic, right? It's not like they've become insolvent. It's not like, yeah, sure, their LTV is high, but like they are over-collateralized. They satisfy the requirements of a healthy lending market. However, what happens is if a liquidation is triggered on an over-collateralized user that has a loan-to-value ratio greater than this toxic loan-to-value ratio, you're going to guarantee that this user is liquidatable over and over and over and over again. This chain of liquidations will only end once the entire collateral of the user is repossessed, leaving some amount of loans left over, which is an insolvency. And this is a deterministic insolvency. Like, it has nothing to do with price. I mean, there are some edge cases where if the price, behaves in a very dramatic way at the exact right time, you can kind of avoid this toxic liquidation spiral. But generally speaking, the price could, from the moment you reach the toxic LTV, the price could literally do nothing, and you will create the insolvency. All right, let's see this in real life, because up until now it just seems total theory. We're going to focus on what is called the Avi Eisenberg incident. I know some of you may know of Avi Eisenberg, the guy that did very profitable investment strategies and then put him in jail. But anyways, Avi, on November 13th on Aave, he borrowed $38 million worth of CRV using $90 million worth of USDC. This is like an LTV of 30%, totally fine, right? On November 22nd, curve prices started swinging very dramatically, and after a series after a flurry of liquidations, the position's collateral was entirely drained, leaving $1.78 million worth of bad debt on Aave, which was swept under the rug mostly. Anyways, let's see this in real time to see how it happened. So this plot, I'm going to break it down for you guys. First and foremost, these vertical black lines are liquidation events, all the liquidation events that happened that day. We got a double y-axis. On the left side, you have the CRV price, which is in green. You can see what CRV did that day. And on the right side, you have the LTV. Okay, so we're going to look at the LTV of Avi over the course. This is between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Of November 22nd. So the Avi's LTV is shown here in blue. The yellow line, which almost hides the blue line, is actually our simulations of our agent-based simulations of Avi's LTV that day. As you can see, it follows his real LTV pretty closely, given that we're modeling liquidators with some assumptions, deviating only when the damage has basically already been done all the way up here. The dashed line here is LTV of 1, so that's the point where his position becomes under-collateralized. The red line is the toxic LTV level that I just described to you guys. And this is the black line here, horizontal. That's where liquidations are allowed to start. That's where his position is liquidatable, right? So we see a first pump in the curve price, which leads to liquidations, but then it corrects really fast. It doesn't allow his LTV to get up to the toxic level. So up to this point, liquidations were behaving exactly as expected. Then we see another pump in CRV price. The user becomes liquidatable, but the price is pumping so fast that liquidators can't keep up with liquidating his position. His LTV reaches the toxic liquidation threshold, and from this point onwards, it's game over. In a matter of 15 minutes, you've created the insolvency. Like, not at all. All right, so how, if you prefer, oh no. Okay, well, I had a video here that basically shows the same exact information in a more visually appealing way. I apologize. I'd have to go on my phone and approve it, so we're just going to skip it. I'm sorry. It was actually really pretty. It's a pretty video. I'm sorry. All right, so how to avoid toxic liquidation spirals? Because up until now, I've just described something that is, I swear to God, this is like crucial for all the forks of Aave and Compound. They all have static incentives. They all define toxic LTVs. So if you can generate a price move that gets a user into the toxic LTV, you will create an insolvency for the protocol. The way its incentive structure is designed. So the way you stop toxic liquidation spirals is you really have two options. Okay, well, three technically if you want to pray for one of these edge cases where the price miraculously saves you at just the right time. You either halt liquidations when you reach this toxic threshold, or you have to dynamically reduce the liquidation incentive. Remember, it's like the toxic LTV is 1 over 1 plus I, so technically if you get to a point where I equals 0, you can get the LTV of the user all the way up to 100% and still be able to allow liquidations that sanitize the user's LTV. All right, let's see this in action. So I'm going to break this plot down little by little. On the y-axis, you have, actually I'm going to move over here. On the y-axis, you have the bad debt, okay? X-axis is time, this is in minutes. You're looking at 24 hours worth of activity. The first thing I'm going to show you is this red curve. This is what happened on Aave that day, okay? The liquidations, the flurry of liquidations took place. The insolvency was created, and then because the collateral has been drained and you just have bad debt, it doesn't matter what the price does, you're stuck with this bad debt forever, okay? And so over the course of the 24 hours following the Avi Eisenberg incident, you just have Aave with roughly $1.7 million worth of bad debt. The purple line right here is what would have happened if liquidations had just stopped. Now, it's common consensus that what happened that day was a price manipulation of curve, right? So by definition, a price manipulation has to mean revert, and that's exactly what happened. So if they had halted liquidations, his position would have been formally insolvent in the sense that his collateral would have been worth more, its loans would have been worth more than his collateral. But then upon the mean reversion of the curve price, Aave would have literally not had any bad debt because the price mean reverted, his LTV would have dropped below the toxic threshold where healthy liquidations could have kicked in again, and then his position would have been sanitized with no insolvency incurred for Aave. All right, now, this is like one price action, like literally what happened that day. Like typically you can't assume that the price is going to do anything specific, right? So let's take the entire Curve USD price history and let's play it 24 hours at a time, like bits by bits, right? Picking random starting points and starting with the user at the toxic liquidation level, right? So just for the record, we were looking at 20,000 different price histories. It's technically 10,000 plus the same 10,000 reversed with different starting points. So you basically cancel out the bear market, bull market net bias. But we're looking at 24-hour simulations. So when you see here is the mean bad debt for the different policies. So in green, you have, it's called here toxic spiral, is basically the current liquidation policy. On average, it creates $750,000 worth of bad debt. And then you have in blue, halted liquidation policy, and in yellow-orange, they're on top of each other because the closing factor doesn't really matter that much, is the dynamic incentive policy, where you lower the incentive as the LTV climbs higher. So up to this point, you're like, okay, it's better, but like, not that big of a deal. The problem is that means don't really mean anything when you're dealing with stuff that potentially has fat tails. If any of your Taleb lovers, you might respond to this kind of nicely. So let's look at the actual distribution of all this data. And I'm going to break this down slowly because there's a lot of information on this plot. And this is the last plot I will show you. So first and foremost, the x-axis is broken in two. Because it's on a log scale. You have on the x-axis you have bad debt on a log scale, right? And it's broken at $1. $1 is just because this is a histogram. Basically, everything you see here, these are all the number of events that led to no bad debt at all. Okay? And then this is the distribution of the events that actually generated non-zero bad debt. Okay? And what you see is the y-axis, I have also two y-axes because the left y-axis is on a completely different scale than the right y-axis. This is because the dynamic incentive plus closing factor and halt to liquidation policies, the vast majority of time, 85% roughly to be exact in this set of simulations, doesn't create bad debt. So 85% of the time, no bad debt is created, even though we're starting the simulation at the toxic liquidation, the toxic LTV threshold. So let's look really, by comparison, the toxic spiral logic, which is the current logic, creates no insolvencies. Sorry, I put the numbers around. Sorry. The normal liquidation logic creates insolvencies 85% of the time, whereas the other policies create insolvencies only 19% of the time. So that's why you see the scale is absolutely massive over here. The vast majority of events end up with no insolvencies whatsoever. But let's look at the tail of the actual extreme events, because this is what made the mean not be zero, right? And what we see is that there's a very interesting trade-off taking place. So the current liquidation logic effectively creates this like very sharply peaked bad debt distribution. Namely, because the dynamics that lead to the creation of the bad debt are so deterministic that they literally play out in a matter of minutes. It's literally however fast liquidators can drain the entire collateral of the position. You're kind of like guaranteed, in a sense, like how bad the bad debt is going to get. Okay, there's like a limit to a pretty deterministic limit to how bad the bad debt is going to get. And so you see, this is the current logic. This is what the peak looks like. By comparison, if you look at the other liquidation policies, the times that they do generate bad debt, because if you're halting liquidation, the price just keeps running and running and running and running. That's bad debt. Like you're not going to get out of that. There's no magical potion to like save yourself from that. They have fatter tails. Now, these histograms that I'm showing to you are at the end of the 24 hours of our simulations. So there's this trade-off that I mentioned to you, but the dynamic policies have an extra bonus. They give you optionality. At any given moment, depending on some war room discussion or governance decision or what have you, you have the freedom, assuming it's integrated at the protocol level, to reactivate the normal liquidation policy. Like if you think that the price is running, the liquidations have been halted and the price is running because the Federal Reserve just announced that they're going to, I don't know, put some amount of their reserves in Bitcoin and Ethereum. That price ain't mean reverting. Like you need to lock in whatever bad debt you have right now and just call it a fucking day, right? So that's basically the main point here is that liquidation policies can be extremely tricky to look at, and it's kind of staggering that a result this simple it kind of like fell under the radar on major protocols that pay millions of dollars for risk assessment have been paying for a number of years now, and at Keom protocol we're implementing these dynamic incentive policies, and if you want to read more about it, you can go find the paper. The paper references our other papers that we've published explaining our general agent-based modeling framework. You can find me on Twitter and Telegram, Pesto Papa, P-O-P-P-A, or just read more on keom.io. Thank you very much.